Alright, what is up everybody? This is Alex once again with the next installment of the EOT Newsflash War of the Spark limited set review. Tonight it's all about the red cards. Get ready to burn some stuff down. Before we jump in, I'd say another huge thanks to Drew for coming on last night to help us review the black cards. If you haven't already, go back and watch that episode. A lot of really good back and forth, a lot of good introspection from Drew, and a really cool look at the not yet exclusive but Japanese art alternate Planeswalker cards for War of the Spark. Really cool episode. A lot of fun with Drew always coming on, so definitely go check that out, as well as the blue and the white cards that are up already. If I'm lucky and I've got the time tonight, I might be able to knock out the green cards as well, so fingers crossed there. But let's not waste a ton of time. Let's get right into things. We'll cover our rubric really quickly here and then dive right into the red cards. So first up we have obviously our S's, our sideboard cards. Bring those in against the threats that your deck normally couldn't handle. Specific threats, like artifacts, enchantments, and things of that nature. B's are your build around me. These cards require a bit of setup before they actually function properly. Things like persistent petitioners come to mind when you need a critical mass of certain number of effects or other cards before the thing actually functions correctly. Your ones are your bottom of the barrel chaff. You really don't want to play these cards, but you will if you need a playable and you're scrapping for those last couple of 23rd, 24th picks. Your twos are your more generic filler. Your deck in limited will mostly be made up of these, so nothing to worry about there. They're still playable, they're still fine. Your threes are your more premium spells, creatures, removal, things of that nature. And then your fours are your absolute bombs that will win you a game. You open your pack, you see the rare, you see the Planeswalker, and you pull into the color, and that's how you're going to win a lot of your games. So, with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. We've got On-Crop Invader up first. 2 in a red Zombie Minotaur Warrior at common, 2/2. As long as it's your turn, it has first strike, and you can pay 1, and you can sacrifice another creature to give it +2/+0 till the end of turn. This is pretty generic filler. It's a 2/2, it's a bear. We talked a lot about this being a bear format last night, and this one has a minor bit of upside with having first strike only on your turn, and unfortunately there's not a ton of threaten effects in this set. In fact, there's only one in red, and it's pretty overcosted as well. So your opponent's going to see the threaten, even if you have the threaten, they're going to see the trick a mile away. So I'm not super excited to play this card, but it's definitely a decent beater. It's a solid 2, but not much better than that with the minor amount of upside that it has. Next up, we've got Blind Blast. 2 in a red instant at common, deals 1 damage to target creature. That creature can't block this turn, and you draw a card. Only the most aggressive decks are going to want this, and even if you are playing, it's way too overcosted. I mean, I'm trying to figure out where what spells are splicing together to give you a card draw and a damage, so I can't figure this one out, honestly. It costs too much, like I said. The effect is so minimal, unless it's just, your last-ditch shot to kill your opponent. I just don't think this is remotely playable. I give it a 1.5, solely for those decks that are so aggressive that every point of damage, counts in their race. So other than that, leave it alone. Next up, we've got Bolt Bend. 3 in a red for an instant at uncommon. The spell costs 3 less if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, and you can change the target of a spell or ability, which is pretty real, with a single target. This is, pretty flexible. Having be able to hit spells and abilities is a really rare thing for red. It's usually just spells. So this is flexible. It is a bit overcosted though. If you can hold up the 1 mana when you do play your one creature that does fulfill the condition, and you can maybe, bend the removal spell, it's probably pretty solid. But I'm not super excited to be playing this, and at 4 mana, I'm pretty sure it's not worth it either. So it's a 2. I might be proven wrong on this one, but as it sits, I'm not excited about this card. Next up is the Bond of Passion. This is the Izzet and the Boros teaming up for their bond. It's a 4 red sorcery at uncommon. You gain control of target creature until the end of turn. Untap it and it gains haste until the end of turn. Bond of Passion deals 2 damage to any other target. I thought that said each other. That would be real, but it's only other targets. This is seriously overcosted. So far we've seen a bunch of cards in red that are just way too expensive for what they're doing here. I have no idea why this is 6 mana. Your usual threaten effect costs 3, and you're telling me that a shock is worth 3 more? I just don't get this one. Unless this is, just the grindiest of formats, I just don't see this being even remotely playable. This may make the top end of your Oh, hold on. Ah, there we go. There's Bolts' head back. I just don't see this being even remotely relevant unless it's at the top end of your red deck curve. And at that point, what are you getting out of this? You sack it to On-Crop Crasher? You sack it to some of the other black creatures? I don't see this one. Maybe there's more sacrifice in this format that I'm giving it credit for, but this is a pretty underwhelming card here. This is a 1.5 for me. Really, really underwhelming. Next up, we've got the Burning Prophet. 1 in a black, 1/3 human wizard at common. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, not just instant sorceries, non-creature, it gets +1/+0 and until the end of turn, and you scry 1. So this is pretty good, I think. It's a 2.25 with a pretty healthy dose of build around me, just because on its base it's pretty weak. But if you can start turning this sideways and start casting a bunch of spells, especially ones that pump its power and give it extra abilities, maybe like Double Strike or First Strike, then this thing is pretty real and can do some serious damage. So it's a build around me, but I think it's still pretty playable in your blue-red spells matter deck. So I'm pretty high on this one, 2.25 for me. Next up, we've got Chain Whip Cyclops. 4 in a red, 4/4 Cyclops Warrior at common. You can pay 3 in a red. Target creature can't block this turn. I went back and forth on this so many times. I started working on this set last night, and I couldn't make up my mind on this guy. It's so high on the curve for aggressive decks. It's pretty underwhelming for your more mid-rangey, maybe like blue-red or black-red more control decks. So I ended up somewhere like on a 2, maybe less. The only real upside I can think about this card is the fact that it's a Planeswalker killer. If you do manage to, untap with this and they've got one guy, most likely you can get through to their walker or to them in that matter. So the ability is definitely worth it if this is a go long grindy format. That 4 mana for it isn't all that much, but it is a heavy investment. You could probably be casting other spells. So it's pretty overwhelming. A 1.5, maybe a 2, but not much better. Next up, we've got our first red Planeswalker, Chandra Fire Artisan. She is back in action. 2 red legendary Planeswalker Chandra at rare, 4 loyalty, and whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are removed from Chandra, deals that much damage to target opponent or Planeswalker. So a pretty cool static effect here. +1 allows you to exile a top card of your library. You may play it this turn, so it's not casting, you're playing, so you can hit lands, which is a big benefit to cards like this that have this wording on here. And -7 is exile the top 7 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. So effectively, when you minus that 7, you're already getting 7 damage to your opponent or a Planeswalker, and any incidental spells you can cast is all the better. She's pretty solid here. 2.25 for me. She'd be a little bit higher if the static ability triggered off of more than just her ultimate. But she is pretty powerful, and just to be able to play lands off the top of your deck with the +1 is pretty powerful and a great way to gain card advantage in red. So it's a 2.25 for me. I might be proven to see this one go a little bit higher though. Next up, we've got Chandra's Pyrohelix. 1 in a red instant at common. It deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. There's not a ton of X1s in this format unless you count the amass tokens at their baseline. So it's going to be a rare case where you split this up and kill 2 things. I see this mostly just being a 2-mana shot going at 1 thing and finishing it off. Possibly better than that if you can ever fork it. Or split it, I should say. But as it sits right now, this one's a 2 for me. I could see this one going a little bit lower if the format just proves that the 2 damage is really insignificant. But as it sits, pretty solid on the face. Next up, we've got Chandra's Triumph. 1 in a red instant at uncommon. It deals 3 damage to target creature or Planeswalker an opponent controls, and deals 5 damage instead if you control a Chandra Planeswalker. So pretty solid. 9 times out of 10, this is just going to be Lightning Strike, and that's more than fine. It's a 2.5 for me. Lightning Strike's always playable limited, and so is this. Next up, we have the Cyclops Electromancer. 4 in a red for a Cyclops Wizard at uncommon. It's a 4/2, and as it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to target creature and opponent controls, where X is the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. This guy is kind of weird. He straddles a line where he's a piece of removal where I would say that your baseline to kill something is going to be about 3 spells in the graveyard. And if you're playing a blue-red spells matters deck, you're probably going to get there. But the body's just so horrendous and will very rarely trade up where you might have something a little bit weaker, possibly kill something. But for the cost and what you're getting out of it, I just don't see it. This is a 2 for me. Blue-red spells, and that's about it, honestly. This card's kind of underwhelming if you ask me. Next up, we've got Demolish. 3 in a red sorcery at common, destroy target artifact or land. There are 2 lands in this set where I could see this being relevant against. A couple artifacts, but beyond that, this is just a sideboard card, played and simple. Don't think any more about it, just move on. Next up, we've got Devouring Hellion. 2 in a red Hellion at uncommon 2/2. As it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice any number of creatures and or planeswalkers, and if you do, it enters with twice that many +1/+1 counters on it. I am not a terribly huge fan of this as it sits on the face, but there is a card in black. I believe it is the Noxious Revival, or the Bonds of Revival, I think is what it is. If you can go late game with this and the board's clear and then bonds this thing back and sack everything that you have left over and then it has haste, that's a combo. We do have the instant that gives a creature haste until the end of turn. Samut's something or other, I think is what it's called. Samut's Sprint, actually. Can get you there, but without any other extra evasion on it, like trample or anything like that. This card's pretty underwhelming, and I don't know if I'm going to go all in on this. Like I said, it's a cute trick with Bonds of Revival, and that's about it. But, be careful with this one. It could come out of nowhere and get you. Moving right along, we've got the Dreadhorde Arcanist. Drew was really high on this card when he came on the show a couple weeks ago. 1 in a red for a zombie wizard at rare. 1/3 with trample. Whenever it attacks, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to Dreadhorde Arcanist power from your graveyard without paying its mana cost, and if you do, you would exile instead instead of putting it back in the graveyard. This needs a lot of tricks to be effective. It's going to hit all of the 1-drop spells, which there are a handful of, but they're not all that efficient. So I think what you're wanting to do here is attack, cast a pump spell, let it resolve, then hit the trigger, and then get that spell back. Or if you have other spells in the graveyard, that also works. It's a definite build around me card here. I don't know if I'm just going to be playing this in any red deck. Definitely a build around me card, but once you do have that deck built properly around it, this is a very powerful card indeed. Next up, we have the Dreadhorde Twins. 3 in a red for a Zombie Jackal Warrior at uncommon. It's a 2/2, and it amasses 2 and it enters the battlefield and gives all of your zombie tokens trample. So here's kind of the other half of the amass deck. So we have a black-blue version, we have a red-blue version, and a red-black version. The red-black version is a little bit more aggressive than your blue-red one is, because you have access to both Death Touch and Trample, which is pretty good here. All the lords are completely playable. This is a solid 2.5 for me. If you have any number of amass in your deck and you've got this in your pool, absolutely playable. Next up, we've got Finale of Power. X-Red sorcery at Mythic. You may cast up to one target instant card and or up to 1 target sorcery card. This is a really weird wording here from your graveyard. So it's 1 instant and sorcery, or one or the other. You can't have like double sorcery, which is underwhelming at best. From your graveyard with converted mana cost X or less without paying the mana costs. If a card is cast this way, you put it into exile instead of the graveyard. If X is 10 or more, you copy those spells twice. You may choose new targets for the copies, obviously. Like all the other finales, X equals 3 or greater is where you start to get some serious value. There's a handful of 1-drop spells that might be able to be hit with this. So baseline 3 is just the very basis of but I don't think you're going to get a ton of value until you, like I said, you do hit that X equals 3 mark. And beyond that, this can just start casting all kinds of nonsense. So it's a solid 3 though, because of just how much you can do with a spell like this, especially if your deck is built around it properly. Next up, we've got Goblin Assailant. Goblin Assailant. 1 in a red, 2/2 Goblin Warrior at common. That's it. It's just a bear. That wall of text right there, it's all flavor. And it's fine. It's a bear, but there are better bears in this set. unless you're just really scrapping from playables or you're in a very aggressive red deck, you'll definitely leave this one in the sideboard. Next up, we've got the Goblin Assault Team. 3 in a red Goblin Warrior with haste. It's a 4/1, and when it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. This thing is super bad. I do not like this at all. The flavor is kind of cute to see all the different goblins of Ravnica kind of team up together against Bolas. But this is not going to trade for anything except their weakest creature, and the +1/+1 counter it leaves behind is absolutely not worth it. It's a 1.25. Only the most aggressive red decks will even go near this card, I think. Next up, we've got the Grim Initiate. A single red mana gets you a zombie warrior at common. It's a 1/1 with first strike, and when it dies, you amass 1. There's, again, these 1 toughness creatures, even though they do leave behind a little extra zombie that can obviously get bigger as the game goes on, just really aren't worth it, honestly. You need some tricks to make it have at least a little bit of impact. The first strike is good, but there's not enough going on here when I could be casting my pump spells on better creatures. And, I don't know how aggressive the blue-red amass deck is or the black-red amass deck is. Maybe this fits in there somewhere as like a one of, but this is super underwhelming if you ask me. Next up, we've got Heartfire. 1 in a red instant at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, and it deals 4 damage to any target. 4 is a lot of damage in this format. There is only one spell that outclasses this on just pure power level of damage output here. So this is just insane here. You will have some fodder for it. I can almost guarantee it. So 2.5 for me. It would be a little bit higher if you didn't have to sacrifice, but as it sits, this is a very powerful spell indeed. And any target, icing on the cake. Next up, we've got Honor the God Pharaoh. 2 in a red sorcery at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. You draw 2 cards and amass 1. This is pretty solid playable stuff here. Typically, this is like Tormenting Visions, I think is the card that we're referring to here. That's usually 2 mana. It has the same effect, but you're just paying 1 extra mana to get that amass creature. So I like this a lot in the amass decks. There's a minor amount of graveyard shenanigans to be found in this set, so even that discard isn't all that high of a cost. It's a solid 2 for me. It might go up higher if the amass deck is actually playable, or this can even just go and just blue-red spell. So it's got some versatility. I need to see this one in action though before I can actually give it a final grade, I should say. And then there's this guy. We've got Ilharg, the Raise Boar. 3 red legendary creature, Boar God, mythic rare, 6/6 trample. Whenever Ilharg attacks, you may put a creature from your hand on the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Return that creature back to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And when Ilharg, the Raise Boar, dies, you put it, or exiles from the battlefield, you put it 3rd from the top of your library. So it does all the same things the other gods do. The only thing that's holding Ilharg back just a little bit is that it doesn't have an immediate impact on the board. Bantu has an immediate effect, Bronus does, Oketra doesn't have an immediate one, but you can't beat that card anyway, and Kefnet flies, which makes this thing a little bit better than poor Ilharg here. And you also have to have creatures in your hand to make it actually worth attacking, and I could see a position on the board of the game where this is all that you have attacking, and they're chump blocking it, or killing it, or bouncing it, or whatever. So he's not really bad. He's not bad. He's not bad at all. He's just not as good as the other ones are, in my opinion. So he's a 3.5 still. Very powerful card here. He's just not going to carry you like I think the rest of the other gods will. So take it as you will. Next up, we've got Invading Manticore. 5 in a red, 4/5 zombie Manticore at common. As it enters the battlefield, you amass 2. I realize I haven't unamassed yet in this review. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on an army creature, on an army you control. If you don't control one, create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first. There we go. This is red's 6 mana, big body, do a thing card. All the colors have one. They're all reasonably playable. I think this one is absolutely playable. It's a ton of power, it's a ton of toughness for a relatively small cost, and being able to just amass more onto the zombie is just icing on the cake. It's a 2.25 for me. It's a nice top end of the curve. Awesome stuff here. Next up, we've got Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage, 4 in a red, Legendary Planeswalker Jaya, uncommon. If another red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead. That's just its static ability. And -2 from its starting loyalty of 5, she deals 2 damage to any target. So she's not able to bolt something with her ability, but that's fine because this is just ridiculously powerful. Any creature, any red creature, any red spell that's dealing damage is just dealing extra power to some more damage. This card is absolutely nuts. It's a 2.75 for me. It's a little bit too high on the curve to be, super effective, but at the same time, it's just awesome. The later the game goes, I think this is better off in a more controlling red deck, red, blue, red, black, maybe Grixis if that's possible here. But yeah, or maybe even just like the top end of your curve with your creatures, you attack and it's lights out because of all that extra damage coming through. Really powerful, 2.75 for me. And next up, we've got Jaya's Greeting. 1 in a red instant or common. Deals 3 damage to target creature, and you scry 1. There's creatures everywhere in Limited. That's just absolutely a thing. 3 damage to any creature will most likely kill a majority of the creatures in this set. There's only a handful that survives. And Scry 1 is just icing on the cake here. This is a 3.25 for me. You're not going to get much better removal, especially at common in this set. Moving right along, we have Krenko, the 10 Street Kingpin, 2 in a red goblin creature. He's a legendary goblin creature at that. He's a rare at 1/2, and whenever he attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to Krenko's power. This is ridiculous. So, here's the thing on Krenko. You've got about a turn to take care of this thing. Otherwise, you're going to lose the game to it. Unless you can, kill it after the fact. But don't let this thing attack if you can. Just absolutely do not. It is a losing prospect if you can't do it at that point. This is a 3 for sure. It gets so out of control so fast. The power stacks up so fast. The tokens overwhelm you. There's just so much going on with this card that you have to deal with the turn it comes down. Otherwise, the game is probably over. That's simple. Next up, we've got Mizium Tank. 1 red artifact vehicle. Got another vehicle here. At rare, trample. It's a 3/2, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it becomes an artifact creature and gains +1/+1 till the end of turn, and it crews for 1. So this is a really good card here. I think this might be a really good win condition for a blue-red spells deck or some kind of red-based control deck. It's a great outlet for your weaker creatures once they get outclassed, and it's going to take at least a couple of things, or at least one big thing, to stop it when your opponent finally manages to take this tank down. Really powerful card here, 2.75 for me. And next up, we've got Nahiri's Stoneblades. 1 in a red instant at common. Up to 200 creatures each get +2/+0 until the end of turn. This is a scary trick right here. Up to 2 creatures here, not just 1, 2. And there is enough First Strikers in this set that there's a ton of damage potentially coming out of this card out of nowhere. So definitely be wary of this one if you're going into combat against a red deck. This could very well be the biggest blowout you've ever seen in a limited format because it's just going to come out of nowhere and hit you hard. 2.25, solid trick, but it's a little bit readable. That's the only downside here. As are all tricks, they're always readable, but never mind that. Next up, we've got Neheb, Dreadhorde Champion. 2 red, legendary creature, zombie Minotaur Warrior. Probably wins the trophy for the longest type line in its entire set. It is a rare 5/4 with trample, and whenever he deals common damage to a player or planeswalker, you may discard any number of cards, and if you do, draw that many cards and add that much red mana. Until the end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So it gives you a nice little boost of mana like the original red Neheb did. I'm blanking on the name all of a sudden. And it, trample's really powerful. The body's nicely sized as well for the cost. So you're going to get a lot of power out of this one. And it's a great way to refuel your hand, especially into the late game. At least if you can keep your hand relatively full. I'm not sure where this wants to, if that ability is going to really come into play. Otherwise, it's just a really big beater. But if you can trigger the ability and gain any amount of card advantage, you're that much further ahead in the game. Definitely a solid 3 for me. Next up, we have got the Rising Crunch. Crunch. I don't know what a crunch is, and I don't care to find out either because this thing's kind of scary. Tuna red for a 4/3 that cannot attack alone. This common beast is definitely a very aggressively costed beater. You probably don't want one or more, well, probably like 2 or more of these things in your deck. But if you can curve, this is your turn 3 play into a turn 4, and you've already got some creatures in play, this is a lot of damage here, but you just have to be worried about your opponent taking out the things that it's also going to be attacking with, and this just being left behind. The upside is that this can block by itself, which is typically not something you see on creatures that have this text. It's usually all or nothing, and fortunately this guy can at least block. So he's solid. He's a solid 2 for me. Only the most aggressive draft decks will probably go for this guy, though. Next up, we've got Samut Sprint. A little bit of parkour here. Hardcore parkour. Single red common at instant. Gives a creature target creature +2/+1, and it gains haste until the end of turn, and a little bit of scry action as well. So this is the way that I think you can really make Ilharg and the Hellion really dangerous, without going outside of your primary color here being red. Really, there's a lot of aggressive decks will be able to make good use of this. It's a good trick. The Scry is good for card selection, which all red decks, sorely lack, especially limited. So any amount of that you can get from your spells here is always a bonus. So I think this card's pretty playable. Solid filler. It's a solid 2 for me. I don't think you're going to have a bunch of these in your deck, but at least 1 or 2 copies will get you where you need to go, especially if you're trying to beat your opponent down very quickly. Next up, Sarkhan the Masterless. We finally see him broken from the bonds of Bolas. Pretty cool stuff here. 3 red legendary planeswalker Sarkhan. At rare, it's 5 loyalty. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. This is nuts. +1 until the end of turn. Each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature and gains flying. So this is kind of like the Sarkhan Dragon Speaker ability, just without the indestructible ability part, which wasn't all that indestructible, for being honest. And the -3 lets you create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So the only downside to Sarkhan here is that you really do have to -3 him first. Because of static ability, there's not a lot of dragons in this set, unfortunately. There's no common dragon flying around in here that we can just play alongside him. So the -3 is almost an immediate must, and unless you've got a couple other walkers sitting around that you can just +1, and this becomes basically a fireball out of nowhere. But the static ability is so powerful. It's going to make this so hard to attack into. Your entire board is basically 1 power, 1 toughness better to take out your opponent's board. So this is a really cool planeswalker. Definitely wish there were more dragons at the common level to make this thing more playable. I think there's a couple of blue ones. Is it a Drake or a dragon in blue? The Thunder Dragon that gets +1/+1 counter for your second spell. I'll have to check. But yeah, Sarkhan's still pretty powerful here. It's a solid 3 for me. Like I said, the -3 is almost your immediate go-to, but you're probably going to be playing this in with a little bit of Proliferate as well. So it's a solid play. So it's a solid player here and a solid 3 for me. Next up, we've got Sarkhan's Catharsis. 4 red instant at common, deals 5 damage to target player or planeswalker. Like, what the hell? This set is so juiced that Lava Axe has gotten power creep now. This is crazy. So this is going to kill a majority of the planeswalkers in this set and could easily finish off your opponent if they're not ready for it. End of turn, Catharsis you. That's Catharsis right there. That is the pure definition of Catharsis. But yeah, most every walker in this set, if they've been down-ticked at least once, will die to this immediately. So any red deck is probably going to want at least a copy of this. Your more controlling red decks will want multiple copies of this. 2+, 5 mana is a lot to pay. But when you're doing this much damage to walkers that will be everywhere in this set, this is pretty powerful stuff here indeed. Next up, we have got the Spell Gorger Weird. This is another card that I'm super excited about to play in blue-red spells here. It's a 2 and a red, 2/2 weird at common. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on the weird. This is crazy powerful. Any draw spell, removal spell, counter spell, planeswalker, you name it, is going to make this weird even bigger and even harder to slow down, and that's amazing. 2.5 right from the get-go here. It's got bear stats, and it only gets better from here. This is a very powerful Magic card. If you're in that blue-red spells deck or a black-red sort of pseudo-control deck, more of a mid-rangey, grind your opponent out with a bunch of removal spells and some creatures like this, awesome power stuff here. Very cool card. Next up, damn it, he's back. Why is he so bad? We have Tibalt, Rakish Instigator, 2 and a red, legendary planeswalker. Tibalt, uncommon, 5 starting loyalty. Your opponents can't gain life, and you -2 him to create a 1/1 red devil creature token with whenever this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. 1.75, and that's only because there is a non-zero amount of life gain in this set that it could be brought in against, but for the most part, do not play Tibalt. Even the devils are useless. And as this is next, I'm going to loop them together. Yeah, just lump these two together. Tibalt's Rager is also a 1.75. You know, it's decent if you have some tricks, but there's so many better cards you can put in this set that you can be putting those pump spells on. Why is this uncommon? I don't understand. This is easily common stats here. The card's trash. 1.75. Let's finish it up. Turret Ogre, 3 and a red, Ogre Warrior at common, 4/3 with reach. As it enters the battlefield, if you control another creature with power 4 or greater, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. The shock, it's whatever, but this is going to be a key piece for the red decks to be able to block all of these massive blue-white flyers, because they're going to get absolutely huge here. So, and the body's relatively well costed too. Hill Giants for 4. Awesome. I give this guy a 2.5. There's a lot of flexibility to him. And that's it. It's all the red cards. I think if I buckle down, I might be able to knock out the green cards tonight. Don't hold me to that. It's been a long day. I'm going to try. At least get the notes ready so I can just come home tomorrow and just knock out the green cards. Because the green cards are awesome. Super awesome. And then that way, we have Thursday lined up to do the behemoth of the gold cards. And that's going to be horrible. It's horribly fun. Horribly fun. Awesome. So, as always, if you disagree with me, that's fine. Let me know in the comments. Did I miss something on a card? Am I just looking at a card the wrong way? Let me know. Let's get the discussion going. That's the only way we get better as Magic players, is by having those discussions and talking about Magic cards. Far too often I just hear people say, well, this card's good because X. And someone else goes, well, no, this card's bad because of Y. And they're both right. And they're both wrong, because everyone has a very different perspective no matter what's going on with a Magic card. So have those conversations with your opponents. Have that conversation with your play group, your friends, and, just build each other up as players. Pre-release is a fun time to play Magic and not the time to be bickering over which playable is better than the other one. So just don't. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video. We'll be doing the rest of the set this week, and we'll be back right again next week for our pre-release sort of reactions. I'm planning to do a Commander review of this set as well, so that's going to be pretty exciting. That's going to be a new one for us. And of course, we'll have Week 1 Standard coming up very, very shortly as well, where we actually get to see the impact of War of the Spark on constructed formats. So, thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll be back later this week with the rest of the limited set review. It's pre-release this weekend, so you know what it's time for? War. And what is it good for? Have a good night, guys.